The scene opens in a small village in a somewhat insignificant country. Jesus, his mother, and the disciples have been invited to a wedding. We're not told anything about the couple, but either they invited too many people or they ordered too little wine. They may have been poor, and we know that Jesus felt much more comfortable with poor people than with rich. Whatever the situation, back in those days, as is the case now, I dare say, wine was an important part of the celebration. To run out of it was a social faux pas. The exchange between Jesus and his mother sounds like something my mother and I might have had. The simple statement, "They have no wine," implies, "And you need to do something about it, Jesus." And Jesus' reply seems to be a cross between, "It's not my problem," and "It isn't any of your business, Mother." He softens what sounds like talking back by explaining, "My hour has not yet come." Does he mean I'm not yet ready to begin my public ministry? Or perhaps I'm not ready yet to perform miracles? His mother doesn't pursue that. Apparently, she just wants to save the married couple the embarrassment of a ruined celebration. So she takes charge. "Do whatever he tells you," she says to the servants, and they comply. The familiar first miracle of Jesus, changing water into wine, not only saves the day, but the wine is top shelf. The end of our gospel passage says, "And his disciples believed in him." One wonders what their relationship has been thus far, although we know they did leave everything to follow him. As I was contemplating the concept of miracle, so many things went through my head. Some folks see the water into wine miracle as a kind of abracadabra magic to get attention. We Christians don't agree. We're not talking about magic. A miracle is generally thought to be an event that is contrary to the laws of nature, or an unusual or wonderful event that is believed to be caused by the power of God. For me, life itself is a miracle. If you've ever seen a baby or a kitten or any living thing being born, it is a most amazing thing. And over time, that completely helpless, totally dependent being begins to grow into a functional being. And that too is miraculous. Everything that's been invented is a miracle of sorts. God gave someone the intelligence, the patience, and the skill to make an idea come to fruition. When I drive my car from Chester to Wolfboro, I'm sometimes filled with wonder to think that I am sitting in a box of metal and plastic parts of various shapes and sizes on 4 rubber wheels, and I go easily, mile after mile, to my destination with little effort on my part. When we lived in Baltimore County, a teenager in my husband Alan's church periodically called my mother to discuss all the many things that had been invented in Miss Genevieve's life. My mother lived to be 99, so you can imagine how fascinating the child's school history projects were, from the Wright brothers on. An elderly, never-ending source of wonder and knowledge. Years ago, I found a book entitled How Things Work. Even that didn't explain everything. I still saw God's hand in everything I read about. When I was a small child, I asked my father why in relation to pretty much everything I came in contact with. He did his best to explain how or what or why, but at some point, the buck always stopped with God. My father was a minister, so we were both always able to agree that when you came right down to it, God was the one who guided the inventor's hands. Back to the wedding and the wine. One of the things that we learn from Jesus' teachings is that we must help other people whenever we can. Granted, at the wedding, it was at his mother's insistence. Nevertheless, Jesus did help the couple. That's who he was. Tomorrow, we remember another person who put other people first, Martin Luther King Jr. Like Jesus, he preached justice and equality. He was sensitive to human rights issues. Like Jesus, he loved the poor, the hungry, the unloved, the outcast. And like Jesus, he put his passion into action. And they were both assassinated for standing up for the right. In my mind, Martin Luther King Jr. was also a prophet, a person appointed by God to bring God's message to others. I may have shared with you that Alan and I took our trailer and our little cat and went on our own civil rights tour last May. Our pilgrimage took us to Tuskegee, Montgomery, Selma, Birmingham, and Hayneville. We visited every museum in those places and were sickened by what we learned. It's bothered me for some time to know that the terrible things that Black people suffered happened in my lifetime, and I did nothing to stop it. I was in my 20s, old enough to have participated in the civil rights movement. I didn't, but hundreds did. It's important to remember that the ultimate success of the movement came on the backs of ordinary citizens. Fighting the powers that be is resounding proof of what ordinary people can do when fighting for a righteous cause. Martin Luther King Jr. may have been a prophet, but he was also an ordinary citizen. It seems that in so-called civilized society, there always has to be a scapegoat. Ethnicity, sexual orientation, age, religion, or whatever ism turns you off. Someone who is different in some way from us. Our behavior goes from the not in my backyard mentality, if local projects don't sit well with a neighborhood, to let's build a wall and close our borders and keep everyone out. The problem with not welcoming the stranger, as Jesus asks us to do, is that innocent, good people get caught up in the effort to keep the bad ones out. There's not an easy solution to any of it that will satisfy everyone. I don't know what the answer is either. Martin Luther King Jr. was not afraid to speak out. Or if he was afraid, his fears did not stop him. It's sad that he was only 39 years old when he died. He would have done so much more. But like Jesus, his all too short life lives on and influences us in ways that we can only imagine. In a paraphrased quote attributed to him, the ultimate measure of a person is not where one stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where one stands in times of challenge and controversy. He gives us a lot to think about. Do you remember a text from the hymn, "There is a Balm in Gilead"? If you cannot preach like Peter, if you cannot pray like Paul, just tell the love of Jesus and say he died for all. We can't all be like Martin Luther King Jr., or Gandhi, or Lincoln, or someone in your life that you admire. I admire the Philadelphia 11, the women deacons, who made women's ordination to priesthood possible in 1974. I admire Katharine Hepburn, who was a champion for women's rights many decades ago. Jackie Robinson, the first Black baseball player in major leagues. Ellen DeGeneres, who came out as a gay person and was subsequently branded a pariah in the entertainment industry, but who has not only landed on her feet, but has been able to help thousands of people fighting their own demons. You can no doubt name others whom you admire, who were not afraid to stand up for what is right and just. It's not easy to say, I'll do what my mother says in front of all these other people and change water into wine, or to stop a bully, or to stand with those who oppose the death penalty, or to do the many other things that our conscience may dictate. I think God understands that. When we promise to respect the dignity of every human being, we say, I will with God's help. And there is where our strength lies. We, like Jesus and Martin Luther King Jr., and all those whom we admire, we are not alone. Those who follow the right for Jesus' sake stand there with us, and may God help us to follow in their footsteps. Amen.